Hey everybody, Edo here, and I am excited because I have James Hudson on. Say hello, James.
Hey guys, how's it going?
And if you don't know, James is from Druid City. I'm not sure if that's going to get clipped in the back, but he's got his logo up, Druid City Games. And this is sort of impromptu because, sort of independently, both of us put up super short Kickstarter campaigns and launched them on the same day.
Yep,
Sunset Over Water for me and Guardian's Call for you, right?
that's right. That's right. Yeah,
And so, I thought I was being aggressive, right? I was like, at first I was thinking 18 days and 17, and then I was like, no, I'm going to do 13 days. And I went to look at him back your campaign, and I was like, he's doing 10 days? Oh my goodness, that's crazy.
yeah,
Um, and seeing as we're both super busy running campaigns, I didn't want to make this video too long, but it's a really interesting and different thing to do short campaigns. There aren't that many. Like Rule and Make did one, but generally speaking, 4 weeks is for a starter, and everyone's doing three, right?
yep.
Um, so to kick off, what were your thoughts around doing a 10-day campaign?
Well, I think first, anyone, especially this, you've ran quite a few of Kickstarters yourself. They suck your soul dry. So right out of the gate, the appeal of it being able to really shrink that thing down into something that is more manageable really saves a lot of just man hours and just heart and soul. I think we all have seen from a couple campaigns, and in most campaigns, you have the big spikes on each end and the lull in the middle. So rationale might say we can cut the lull in the middle out, move the ends together, maybe get similar amount of money and backers in the same amount of time or in less time. So there's a couple. I don't know. What were some of your reasons?
Yeah, certainly that fatigue piece is a big deal, and for me, it was interesting because I think it's tantalizing to do a short campaign. You're like, could I do a 13-day campaign? Legendary Creed, all my campaigns have been on the longer side, and so one piece of it was shorter. Also, if you have a full-time job, running a Kickstarter campaign can also be just rough. So like having it short is valuable there. But also, there is it's almost the same things that you mentioned, right? There is that lull in the middle, and that, not to say that doesn't pick up dollars,
Mhm.
but I think it fatigues you as a creator, it fatigues you as a backer, and doing so many Kickstarters myself, over time you just see the market's getting more competitive. People's
Mhm.
attention spans are shorter anyway,
Mhm.
and you have your friendly, not so friendly, just opportunistic backers that bounce around. And to some degree, again, with Legendary Creatures having lived through so many major game releases and then seeing that sort of competitive side, it was just sort of like, well, maybe I can condense this. And as you said, maybe not make quite as much in terms of funding. Like, I think you do add up dollars in that period, but not necessarily have the sort of strain and other negatives that come with it. That was a big part of it when I was thinking about it.
Yeah, no, and for me on this particular project with Guardian's Call, I had a limited set of stretch goals. And so, if you've got a 30-day campaign and let's say you do really well and you don't have stretch goals to keep clipping down, or you have big gaps in between stretch goals, it really can frustrate backers. It can, again, wear down on you as a creator. And so, again, part of that thought process was let's just suitcase this thing into a nice little accordion. And that way we can keep the energy up, short period, and then we can get to manufacturing the game. Let's get to the part that we really want, which is the game in our hands.
Right, right. And certainly that stretch goal issue, I know with Herbaceous, I didn't have a big set of stretch goals set up. And so it was like, we hit all of our stretch goals in like the first week. And so it was 2 more weeks of not really just dealing with people asking about stretch goals the whole way through. I also think that getting into hands is a big deal. We're coming to the end of the year. Not that 1 week is going to make a difference one way or the other, or 2 weeks, but still sealing up the campaign, getting rolling. In the case of Sunset Over Water, I have a pretty aggressive calendar date. I still have some space in there, but part of
Mm-hmm.
that's because it's a small game. Most of the assets are in place. I'm not quite like campaign ends, flip the switch, especially because some of them involve Beth doing new art for landscapes,
Right.
but it's pretty close. We feel really good about the play. It's really polished. It's not like when I did Siblings Trouble, I had like probably 4 or 5 months of development on art needed. So I needed that time. And now it's sort of like, no, I want to find out, get people who are interested, engaged, get excited, make it and ship it, right?
That's right.
And so I think that definitely influenced it. I know that I've caught some interesting, unexpected negatives. Have you seen anything that had come up on your end when you think about the decision to go to 2 weeks from a backer perspective?
I just think they feel, at least the backers who have already backed the game, they have shown concern. It seems like, oh, we're definitely not going to hit the stretch goals because you haven't given us a fair amount of time. Like there's some sort of you've cheated the game. There should have been more. There should have been a third and fourth quarter, and you cut the third and fourth quarter out.
Right.
Which, again, it kind of ties back into the urgency factor. Like, I think we could make some assumptions that if the campaign is shorter, instead of people perusing the campaign for 30 days, if there's only a 10 or 14-day campaign, you would go ahead and make your decision if you want the game or not.
Right.
I would, as a backer, and I've backed 430 some odd.
Crazy, man.
That you can't learn the thing to do it unless you do it. So I've learned so much from like watching other people's campaigns and looking at their updates. So, that was part of it. And so we're dealing with different personalities across the entire spectrum, right? So we're going to have some people who love it. We have some people who hate it.
I definitely, things that came up. So on the caution side, there are different news cycles that you want to pick up. So, different channels do only talk about the previous week or the next week or the month. So I definitely would keep that in mind, right? Like, so if you get too short, you might miss a Board Game Geek newsletter or something like that. And understanding the big, huge places that people consume that a game's out, I do think there is a little bit of a window of like missing people knowing about your game. But
Sure.
Something that surprised me on the backer feedback was sort of similar to what you said. One, I think a backer's either going to be interested in being excited because of a stretch goal or because they want to show off the game. I don't think compressing it changes that, right? Like either you're somebody who's going to be hollering about the game the whole way through or you're not. And so like unless you compressed it to like, hey guys, this is a 3-day campaign. Everyone needs to go nuts for 3 days because it's a 3-day campaign period, and we're never gonna we're gonna go Batman on you and never ship it to retail, right? Like that might get people to just be on and pounding the pavement, so to speak. But I think in a 10-day, it's still sort of like, well, I shared it when I backed, and it's your job to promote it, so I'm not going to do any. And there's nothing wrong with that sort of approach. But that sort of, well, I'm just putting my quarter in, and I'll come back when it's done.
Yep.
And I think so. Even at 10 days, or mine was 13 or 12, but what yours had at, I have not seen it turn into meaningful backer engagement. That's urgency. And perhaps there's other things that I could have done, or perhaps you could have done, like a really aggressive countdown timer, or rather than doing typical stretch goals, it's more like, hey, everyone, we're targeting whatever 5K a day, and every day, sort of like what Jamie did with Scythe that burnt him bad, but not quite as like he did it over like 70 stretch goals but maybe there's a compressed way of like a daily goal that says, hey guys, we're running on a week, and each day everyone who backs this project should be interested in going out and sharing and pushing and sharing and pushing. With so many Kickstarter campaigns, I just don't think that backers I mean, I've talked a lot about this a lot in my videos. I just don't think backers. It's just it's a retail channel now. It's not. It's like a cooler version of Amazon with some, but they're not. They're backing a lot of things. They don't want to spam their channels with your game and my game and this game and that game because they've sort of backed a number of them, right?
Sure, yeah.
So that was interesting. I'm trying to think of. There was a couple other things that struck me.
I think I had one mistake. I know that I won't say it's a mistake, but it was definitely something that I'll consider next time if I do another short campaign. Is I set my goal funding up for a big campaign, whereas I needed to probably really rethink that and have a because what happens, and you know this very well, if a game doesn't hit funding by a certain amount of time, then it starts to lose momentum and lose steam. And on a short time, you don't have time to make that back up. There's just no window for error there. And so, that's something to consider for the next time that I do one, if we do another short campaign.
Yeah, I remember when this was like 2 days ago. I mean, this is a hot video, guys. Like, it's going to post, I think Thursday I have something with Steve, but on Friday this will post. But this is like, it's Wednesday right now. So like, we just launched. This is a hot video. But that's sort of, I remember seeing your campaign. I was like, wow, 30K. That's an aggressive 10-day campaign. And there's that momentum thing, right? Because I think you want to be in that stretch goal conversation. You want to be in that like funded and ticking off the like, hey, we're 1,500 away, we're 1,500 away, to sort of drive that attention. And when I know with Legendary Creatures, again, when there's a gap, it's tough. And the longer it is. Now, on the positive side, there's not as much time to have the momentum hurt you in a shorter campaign, right? When you're in that middle period for 10, 15 days in the middle, it's like very hard to pop it. How much condensing did you do in terms of your did you find that when you were looking at 10 days, it was really easy to sort of fill those 10 days with interesting media and different events?
Yes.
As opposed to trying to get 20?
It was a lot easier, and that kind of played into that too. So it seems like every day in the next 2 weeks, right? Because nobody plans anything on a Saturday and Sunday. It's a wasteland on Kickstarter on the weekend. But we've got things that are dropping almost daily for those really 7 to 8 days that are kind of in the window. Yeah. And that made that a lot easier to set those up and kind of coordinate that. Whereas
that they're going to be there and all that stuff.
Yeah, 20 of them, that's impossible. So you just don't, and then those 2 weeks in the middle just
gets boring, right? And how much of a run up to it did you do? Sort of how much pre-campaign did you do? Is it comparable to your other games? Was it less? Was it more?
It was somewhere in between. Grimm had a longer tail on the front end because we had assets ready faster for that than we did because there was so much of that. It was a huge project to build out over time. So the first, say, 20%, I had to share pretty early on, whereas this game had more of a shorter tail. But we did the Man vs. Meeple off the shelf where we actually showed the game off in a tabletop-esque style video where we actually played it. And that was up 5 days before launch. So it had and it's got a great view count. And then we just had our normal BGG ads, pre-marketing on Facebook, all the things that we would normally do to just get the word out. And we had great engagement there too, as far as even like likes and comments on creative assets and things like that. So
now, do you happen to know if right now, I don't know the sort of spectrum of games that are out now that you're competing with, Sunset Over Water's super right filler, really specific target audience, and in that category, there are a couple other games, but I feel pretty good that we, from an execution and just sheer, Beth's art is incredible, and just that sort of look, it feels, I feel good about that tier. When you're looking at sort of what's at that, the gameplay, you're $39, I think you're $39, that box size. Right. Is there a lot going on right now? Are you facing a lot of different titles, or is there anything in the timing that's relevant to you?
There's a lot of games, it's super heavy this year compared to October, say, of last year.
Oh yeah.
Obviously there's 7 Continent that's just sucking up all the air in the room, but also driving everybody to the platform. So it's that double-edged sword conversation again. There's, Terminator, the Terminator game. There are a bunch of games that are in that $40 to $60 range, which put us at the bottom of that range, which I thought was a good thing. Plus, just what's in the box, this is an appropriate cost because we also subsidize our shipping. So we already, we try to subsidize that. It's free shipping to the U.S. Guess what, guys? It's not free. We pay for it. So if we'd like the game to be $29 and we charge $10 to ship it, we could do the exact same thing if that feels better to you. But I think everybody likes to see an all-in price as much as they can.
I struggle. I've gone both ways on lots of campaigns, and actually, it's interesting. One of the advantages to doing the all-in price is that makes that base price higher because you've added the $5 or $10 in, so that when European and international backers see their dollars, the difference is lower, right? They're like, oh, it's $10 on a $40 game is totally different than $20 on a $20 game. Then they're like, I'm paying the cost of the game, and it's like, well, so it's a little bit tough. With Sunset Over Water, I went for the additional $5 U.S. shipping as an afterwards. Part of that, for me at least, in terms of thinking it through, was Sunset Over Water is a more expensive, bigger game than Herbaceous. It's just two different card sizes. It's got meeples. I mean, Herbaceous is really sort of, it's got the dividers, but otherwise just those cards. And it was 19, so I knew, and it weighed, the big thing was it weighed less than a pound, right? So it's a much cheaper shipping. Sunset's like a pound and a quarter, but I can't use first class mail anymore. But I sort of wanted to still be at that price point with Herbaceous for that backer group. So I went this time, instead of including it, I pulled it out. But
yeah, because you're right. Value proposition wise, while the game components are different and it weighs more and it has more to it, visually, perceptually, it's a card filler game. So
that's
and
I'm clearly, if you look at the campaign, pushing something as, hey, you like Herbaceous, you have Herbaceous in one hand, you should have Sunset Over Water in the other. And I feel really happy that the reviews and stuff bear that out, that people really feel that way. But again, that's sort of that comparison point. Did you find, in terms, how much was Grimm how much was the actual deal? Was it 39 or 49?
49. Mm-hmm. Yeah. With free shipping.
All right.
So it's a box game, and I do think there's Terry from Geek and Sundry wrote an article on Guardian's Call, and her opening
came out like today, right, or this morning?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, and her opening line was, "Bluffing games are polarizing," and I'm feeling that now, right? Like that. Either people love bluffing games or they absolutely hate them. I've just seen people say, "Oh man, this game looks fantastic." Totally not interested. You're like, come on, you got to at least come on.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, what game? Oh, with Heroes and Tricks. Heroes and Tricks. It didn't really come out. I knew it was sort of a love or a hate type of game, but I think it was a weird and interesting enough trick-taking that people who are like, I hate trick-taking games, which is like a big category of people hate trick-taking games, were like, well, it seems a little different, I'll give it a shot. What we found out afterwards, what we found out in the marketplace was, of all my games that Pencil First Games has done, Heroes and Tricks is the most where I get people who just love it, but then I get people who are like, I don't understand this game at all. Like, it's too much chance, too random, forget it. So I think there's some challenges there, and that's the cool thing about Kickstarter and why it's such an awesome platform and so valuable to support creators is it allows people to take risks, right? Sure. Like it's like, hey, this is the most badass bluffing and deduction game out there. Like, you got to check it out because otherwise you're not going to ever experience anything like it, right? So I think the that kind of opportunity is really important to be able to allow creators to do that, and that's why I think supporting it is so important.
No, you're 100% right, because my next two games that we have lined up that we're developing, one's a tile flipping, tile laying, tile builder, so deck building and tile laying situation. But from Scott Caputo, he's the tile master. He is the tile master.
I, too, am working on a tile game with Scott, but different.
Hey. You tell me the name of this when we get off the air. And then the next game is a worker placement dice rolling situation. So the next two are very, I don't want to say tropesy, but they're very mainstream types of games that I know will do well. So you're right. Kickstarter does give me, and this being my design, I have my little heart on my sleeve, that it's my design and that I think it's really, really good. But yeah, you're right. Trick taking, dexterity games, real time strategy, any of those categories that just instantly turn some people off. This gives us an avenue to really, hopefully, get it funded and get it out there.
Yeah, and there was that interesting one that Mayday just did with Rush Hour or whatever it was called, with Rooster Rush with Antoine Bausa. I mean, you can't, talk about a big designer.
Yeah.
And I don't know the background between what Mayday was doing and how they were approaching it, but that got seemingly very little attention. Um, so back onto the just to go back quickly onto the shorter campaign, right?
Sure.
So I think one thing I would say is, just the sort of final thoughts type of thing. I think on a shorter campaign, for sure, you want to leverage all the strengths and understand the weaknesses of a shorter campaign
Hmm.
and use it as an opportunity to like heavily double down on what you're going to do each day and how you're going to really maximize. I feel like maybe not with Sunset Over Water because of the audience, but I think if I was more of a mainstream audience, just trying to have really exciting daily events, engagements to say, hey, look, we're going to do 7 days, but every day you're going to come in and read this update in the morning because I'm going to blow your mind with some cool thing we're doing, and you're going to want to know about it and tell your friends about it. Um,
Yeah, IDW did that with Legends. I mean, that was a really great campaign where they didn't have stretch goals and they just had unveilings, daily unveilings.
yeah, something like that, right? Lets you get there, and perhaps, you know, um, that could be something you could do. I mean, it comes down to sort of your confidence in how you're going to raise, right? Right. At the end of the
Sure.
day, stretch goals sort of match how you're raising money. But if you sort of feel like if you knew for sure that giving away all the stretch goals meant you were still going to track the total number the same way as if people unlocked it, something like that might make sense, right? But at the same time, you have to figure it out. Did you do any something I haven't done in a long time? But did you do any like social unlock for this for 500 likes or 300 shares or any of that kind of stuff?
No, I've never done the social unlocks. I don't like those, to be perfectly honest, personally. I feel like I'm like really pigeonholing somebody into making them do something socially. I would rather them organically do that because they're excited about the
Sure.
campaign. I don't mind asking people in like an update or anything like that to, hey, share this out, that sort of thing. But I never want to coerce or force someone to go share it or tweet it or anything like that. So I've just never really liked those.
Yeah, I've had them at one point or another, and to do them well and really maximize, they require a lot of attention, and I sort of have that same feeling. Though, I mean, they do drive behavior, right? That kind of thing gets people going and gets people doing it. There was one other thing that a backer said to me. One of the things that comes up all the time, and Jamie Stegmeyer started to do this with that slash, day 29 of 30. Certainly, a lot of people come to that campaign and feel like it's halfway through, right? They don't. It's not like they're like, oh, 13 days of 13. They assume it's 13 of 30 or 13 of 24. So there is a perception impact, and so I don't know if it's about putting it out on the front graphic or what, but certainly backers were like, why? It's interesting. Backers often ask for more stuff or different stuff on games I've done. This is the first time I sort of had backers like, hey, why did you do this? Could you explain why you did a shorter campaign? Because I don't understand it.
Right.
And and I had never really seen that before, both in terms of actual backers and just people looking and watching.
Sure. It's interesting to see, like, whereas mine hasn't funded yet and yours has, that you're getting the same questions. Because on mine, it's, hey, have you given us enough time to fund and hit stretch goals? And on yours, it just seems more like why did you do it?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, and yeah, I guess I haven't looked, but you have a little bit. Your stretch goals they're still sort of further apart in the sense of like, is it like you like there's like a 30 and like a 35 and a 50, or what's your stretch goals?
Yeah. So we fund at 30, and then at 35, there's a package that we didn't have a lot of stretch goals. So I wanted to kind of lump things together and make
Sure.
them
Cool.
very attainable. And so, big upgrade to the components, just kind of covering everything, not just a one-off card, whatever. It's all the thickness linen, blah blah blah. And then we have some content within the treasures and the quest cards.
Right.
So, and then at 50, we're adding player miniatures to each of the characters, and there's 5 of them. And so that's one of those that this game doesn't need miniatures to make it work, but it would be a nice upgrade. So it is a true stretch goal that
Sure.
if we hit this volume, then we can spread that out and make the game nicer.
Yeah.
And
Well, and you
you know,
guys, you're like miniature experts. I mean, you do a really nice job. Um,
yeah, well, good. I don't do anything. I have an artist
well,
who's
sure, sure. But yeah, no, it's been there. You certainly going from for sure going from 3 weeks to 2 weeks. You hit a field where people notice it and it's different. You're no longer doing what other people are doing at that point. Um, would you do it again? What do you think?
So I think so. Grim was a 24-day campaign, so it was it wasn't the normal 30, but it was 24. This being 10, maybe somewhere split the difference. I definitely think there are some huge advantages to what we talked about earlier, but maybe there needs to be, to what you said, there are some cycles that you need to be able to hit, and they need a week to even consume what you have, and then it comes out the next week, and then you need that week for it to filter. And
Yeah,
so, yeah,
that's part of the challenge. I definitely think, and I noticed it. I didn't. You don't think about it in a longer campaign, but I was like, oh, he's not going to do that video. He doesn't do that post. He does it Sunday from the previous week's stuff. And there's all these interesting places where it's going to be weird because there's like campaigns this week and campaigns ending, and you could find yourself sort of like
in both.
I don't know what's going to happen. It starts breaking things down because of it's all automated at times. It didn't help either of us that KickTrack was also down day of. Um,
Oh,
it,
no,
it, it, it's interesting to think how those channels, are servicing a lot of people, but also, end up being big, you know, view sites, right? Places that like a game. If you launched your game and BGG was down that day, that would be a big problem. I mean, if Kickstarter was down, it'd be pretty bad too. But I mean, there's just places where, and when you have an issue like that, it's hard to your ability to pivot and deal with the situation and sort of figure things out goes down when you
tools.
you have very little time, right?
Yeah, you don't have any time or tools. Like if the tools aren't there,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, you're right. If BGG goes down and you had takeover banners for that day, it's bad news bears.
Yeah, for sure.
I think Simon had that with Rising Sun. They kind of blew up the Kickstarter servers, and there was a big time when they were supposed to be launching. It was like it was a couple hours before they
I
got
remember
it.
that day. Yeah.
So,
The other thing I'm sort of curious. Now, do you do pre-orders?
I do.
I don't typically. So one of the things I'm curious about is how sort of out of control will the requests be post campaign, right? Because it's a shorter campaign,
Right.
and because
Right.
there's these overlapping things that sort of will flow over. On a longer campaign, I'm used to like 5 or 10 or 15 people talking to me and
Sure.
giving them an answer. I'm curious if with Sunset, if it turns into more of an issue with a lot of people who missed it.
So it was kind of the idea too. That kind of played into the shorter campaign, right? So getting it into the pledge manager, it's the same amount of money, and if you offer the exact same thing to the backer, it's really no different, right? It's just the stretch goals are locked in. We're no longer expanding those.
Right.
But it's fully stretched a game. There's no difference other than where they send their money.
Well, right. In your case, using a pledge manager and um, having pre-orders. Again, I don't use a pledge manager. I'm traditional. They go those Kickstarter surveys. So really, like a lot of it turns into, hey, if you didn't get in, no, you missed that exclusive. You might be able to grab it in the next Kickstarter, and for these little packs. And otherwise, hopefully, it comes to retail and you can take a look. I think
Can you dive into that? Why do you not use a pledge manager? What is your thought process there?
um, so things have changed over time. But with Liftoff, I set up a pre. It was sort of pre-pledge manager, but I set up a pre-order page, and like 10 people, and like it was like I had to follow them up, and I had a Stripe page, and I had to do the work, and then like it was a different process for fulfillment, and I had to make sure they got it, and like it just like when I add up the amount of time it took to have 10 extra people get the game. Um, at that point, I was like, forget it. It's just not. I'd rather just say wait until retail. You might not get something, but then you're interested when retail comes, and that's good for I want stores. It's not a bad thing for stores to get that.
Right.
Pledge managers have come a long way. Um, I don't keep a big inventory of stuff here, so it's not. I'm not really set up right now. So I'm still full-time job land, right?
Sure.
I'm not setting myself up for sort of regularly packing and shipping and selling games. So I certainly could do it. I certainly could do it. I could have done it on this campaign, but I've sort of been a traditionalist. I don't know. At some point I'll break. I mean, I know I speak with Keith Matejka a lot, and he did really well. And I have the inventory, not here, but like, I mean, I have a line of games. It's not like I only have one game.
Right.
But that's where Pencil First Games is still in Hobbyland, despite, doing a lot of Kickstarters.
Sure.
I haven't driven into it like you have with Druid City, right? And I think it's awesome that you do it, and I envy it, that sort of complete dive. But I'm still sort of like, what am I, by setting all this up, how much, I'm going to make a couple extra bucks, but then I have to spend more time. Like, I'm really time bound by myself driving the stuff, right?
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, that's sort of the answer, I think.
Okay. Yeah. I was just curious. Yeah.
I might do it someday.
On the other end, I think viewers would be interested to know that too. So that's why I asked.
Oh, no, it's a good question. Yeah. And backers. That's another thing that splits people. People are like, are you using a pledge manager? No, why not? Or yes, why? I hate you. And, there's certainly... But that's actually, of all the FAQ questions I have, the first one was, we will not be using a pledge manager. And I think that I like the one where it's the dollar support to lock into the pledge manager.
Yep.
But, yeah,
I definitely think it keeps people from backing sometimes because they're like, oh, I can pay later? Okay, I'll just pay later.
Yeah.
So, it does have that is there because in my $1, it's exactly what you just said, access to the pledge manager.
Yeah. No, I think there's some truth to that. It's weird. I mean, it's I try different things, right? I'm always trying different things, going with the shorter campaign, longer campaign, watching. It comes up. Sometimes it's like people suggesting I do a Patreon for the video stuff, and it's like, yeah, I could do a Patreon, but then I'd have to like log into a Patreon site and set up an account, and I just can't have another social media account right now, or I'm gonna,
that friction. You just can't deal with that friction.
Yeah, well, it's just like, how many places do I have to remember to post in? It's like sure. Facebook and all of the board game Facebook groups, man. It's like there's so many of them, and they're all having the same conversation in certain ways. So it's tough. Anyway, I mean, and so you've been happy with the pledge manager, presumably done well for you.
Yeah, so on my end, I've used two different ones, and I had a really, really good experience with Pledge Manager with Adam, who also is Kick Track, and so his team done a great job of follow-up. They have a support team that answers a lot of the questions. It's the same percentages that you pay for fees as you would on Kickstarter, so as far as that's concerned, nothing really changes as far as your math, and it allows me to keep taking orders all the way up to the point that I'm ready to say, all right, let's finalize the order at the manufacturer. Here's the number. And that's usually where I shut down the pre-orders at that point.
Sure.
And the back end of that, you get a spreadsheet just like you would from Kickstarter. So the secretary work is the same.
Right. Yeah, and I've heard great things about them. I think the other thing I'm considering this year is I've done all of the U.S. fulfillment so far. I use Galaxy Quest. Yeah, Galaxy Quest. No. There's Spiral Galaxy Games and there's Games Quest. I'm using Games Quest right now for EU and that kind of thing. But usually I handle all of the United States, doing Herbaceous and Heroes and Tricks at the same time here last year. Sort of probably broke my house down. And like there's just a scale when you're... 500's okay, but when you're in the thousands and thousands of units, I don't know. And so this is the first time I'm thinking about like Quartermaster. Who does your U.S. fulfillment? If not
Fun Again.
Fun Again. Do they have another name? Because I've heard Fun Again and somebody that works. They just go from Fun Again.
Yeah. And they're West Coast. So depending on who you use, I use Starlet for Citadel for Canada. So they have a system where they can just shuffle those units up to Canada. It really makes that really convenient. And Nick over at Fun Again also has a connection with Maxi, who is in Sinwich in Germany. And so they all do a really good, and Maxi's also a forwarder. So I kind of have a one-stop shop there to cover those three big areas. And that's really nice. So I can typically ask Nick a question and he can answer for the EU side and Canada because he's familiar with all that's going on.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna do something. Got to figure it out.
Your pictures on the Facebook. I remember seeing those. You just had like USPS boxes everywhere, the hallways, and the kitchen table was like
Yeah,
a flood.
there's just a point where it's no longer reasonable. Like I don't mind it. I like enjoy it, but there's just a
Sure.
point where you're like, there's so little space when you have to like stage in multiple rooms and unstage and restage. You're like, I'm just moving stuff just to make room to move stuff. But we'll see. I mean, I think the this was the first year that Pencil First Games has a little breathing room. Like most of the games, from a financial perspective, sort of beget the next game. Herbaceous has done. We're on our third. We're about to kick off our third print of Herbaceous. That one has, again, nothing crazy, but enough that like the bank account grew a little bit, and so there's a couple more options here or there. But so that gives a little more breathing room. So again, when it looks at, hey, here's a margin of $1 less for 1,000 extra man hours at home.
Right.
Then you're like, what? Maybe we'll just spend the other $1. I'm not getting paid for this. But anyway, so we actually turned out into a pretty long chat. Any other questions or things in your mind? You got some good questions today, sir. You should do a Q&A channel.
Well, I guess the only other thing to kind of, I would say that Kim Brayback also kind of turned me onto this with Unfair, but go ahead and get a quote from your manufacturer about
that boxing thing,
correlated shipping box, because if you go to your fulfillment companies, if you're using one, and you can ask them what is their pick and pack fee, and will they reduce it if you send pre-packed boxes. All of mine gave me $1 off. Well, it didn't cost $1 to make that at the factory, so you're cutting down on your damaged goods a lot, because it's way better than somebody picking and packing and taking out of cases and all that. So something to look into for creators that are watching this. I think that mathematically is a good move, and it helps your branding too, because now you can brand that box on the outside and backer. Like the design they did for Unfair, I kept it. Like, it's so cool how they used all the backers' names. I still have it over there.
Yeah, no, I remember him writing about it. I mean, I thought it was awesome. It was just a super great idea. Maybe I might not dive in now, but I think it's a great approach and a great way, and I'm still trying to figure out. There's so many different avenues you learn about as you're doing, just you're a one-stop cradle to grave, so to speak, development, production, marketing, creation, designing. When you're doing all that, each little area, you learn a little trick and a little secret to make.
Definitely try not to be the prideful person, because I feel like I've got my little deal set up. But when somebody presents me with a new piece of information, I don't want to automatically just say, no, I've already got that figured out, without really listening to what I say. Because I mean, like you're saying, there's something new coming up every day, or somebody is like, wow, why didn't I think of doing it that way?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, again, with Kickstarter, it's hard. It's always hard. I mean, I'm sort of at this stage, I guess, I'm not quite an elder, but I'm a middle-aged Kickstarter creator, and I've done a lot of these. And
you've got down to a science.
It can be tough, and it can be challenging, and just the way every 6 months I come back to the platform, things have changed, features have changed. Oh, did you notice this? I didn't. This is a brand new Kickstarter thing. They now break out the preview link from. They turn it into a custom URL in the campaign dashboard, whereas before they bundled it into what Kickstarter did. So that was new. That was new thing. So now, typically, the Kickstarter portion looks really big, but now they broke that out. So they're even changing their platform every day.
I wish they would change it where we could get our referral links before the campaign launches, so that you don't have to do a mad rush sending out referral links on the day of launch.
Yeah, I agree. That's actually why I tend not to do it, because I'm much more interested in having all my emails ready and written and set, and I just want to wake up at 5 a.m. and just go send, then have to scramble and pull that all together.
I must have the data. I must be able to take my Google Analytics and overlay it with the numbers in there and see where things come from. I have to know.
All right, man. Well, so good luck in your remaining 7 or 8 days. I hope they're awesome. And we should chat again, but it's always great talking to you, man.
Yes, sir. You too.
All right. And thanks, everyone, for watching. Subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Bye.